Hey, boils and ghouls, welcome to this week's episode of Halloweekly, where George and I interview Cecil Trachtenberg, the one-man army behind the best YouTube channel you're ever going to find, Good Bad Flicks. In fact, when you're done with this, check it out. Or check it out now, then watch it. That'll probably make more sense. Either way, listen to this, check it out, and subscribe to his channel. It is beautiful. Enjoy. For the poor unfortunate souls who have not yet discovered Good Bad Flicks, could you tell them a little bit about the channel?
Good Bad Flicks is a channel that started a while ago. Originally, I did it on a website called blip.tv that is no longer in business. They were one of the early competitors with YouTube that was probably came the closest to actually achieving that, but they eventually got bought by Maker, who got bought by Disney, and then Disney closed the doors. But anyway, I had started over there more or less as a way to introduce a lot of friends of mine. I have friends all over the country, and I wanted to introduce them to some lesser known movies and just put my own kind of spin on it. And I was originally just doing it for them, but then I found that other people who I didn't know were watching the videos and were enjoying them. And then after I realized that, hey, you know, people might actually like this, I took it over to YouTube and started doing it there, and then it kind of took off from there. And I've expanded since then. I talk all kinds of movies. I talk action movies, mostly horror, but I also talk about a lot of movies that have had troubled productions, things that they went through, why the movies didn't turn out as well as they should have. And then I'll do episodes where I'll talk about how things went right. For example, I did a video not that long ago about 30 Days of Night and about how the studio pretty much gave the director carte blanche, said, hey, we recognize this vision that we want to do. Here's the money. Make the movie you want to make. They stood back and let him make the movie, and the movie's fantastic. So it's really nice to be able to counter that, where it's like, because I have so many episodes, like I did the episode on on the remake of Black Christmas. I did the episode on the 2011 Thing, where they made this movie and they're like, hey, we got this really great movie. And the studio came in and said, what? We don't want a good movie. We want a movie that'll make us money. And then they botch the whole thing. And you get people that will hate the movie. And I wanted to show them that, you know, there really is a good movie in there. It's just a lot of people don't know the whole story. I guess kind of a behind the scenes thing. And a lot of people really enjoy that. They like knowing that. And it's interesting. And then, like I said, with the other stuff, I go into enjoyable B movies, and I do some video game stuff and a little bit of everything nowadays.
I love it. Yeah, and the Exploring series, like the positive spin that you take on the Exploring series is probably one of the greatest things on YouTube, because everyone else, it's so easy for them just to find a horror film and just shit all over it. And we even had an author come on, John Townsend, and he was a big guy in like 30s and 40s horror. And I think out of all that, there was really only one critic who actually was like, yeah, horror films can be fun. So out of all of those guys, there's only one of them.
Critics like to get negative fast, and that's the thing. I really loved your video on Blair Witch 2, and I had seen the movie, but wow, there was so much in there that I missed that I discovered through your video, like the stuff they were hiding, kind of subliminally, right?
Oh yeah, Blair Witch 2. That video. I think I spent like a good 2 months researching it. Wow. And it's that to me was one of the biggest blunders that a studio ever made, because I mean, Joe Berlinger, who was the director, he came to the studio and after the just obscene, money maker that the original Blair Witch was, and they wanted to make a sequel, and he went to them and was like, look, you don't want to do the same movie again. We have to do something different. And he gave them the idea, and they were cool with it, and they funded it. And then after he made the movie, they were like, what is this? And it's like, weren't you listening to me? I said I was going to make a satire. And they made him, film all those scenes with the blood and guts in it out in his backyard, and they re-edited the movie to put it out of order, and it just had so much good going for it. And the thing is that the sad truth of it is that the real movie is there within like the DVD and the or it never did get released on Blu-ray, but it's there. It's just you have to take out all the nonsensical scenes of blood and guts and put the movie back in order. And the one thing that I could see being a problem is the soundtrack, because the movie originally opened with Sinatra's Witchcraft, and they had Disposable Teens from Marilyn Manson. And if you watch the movie with Witchcraft as the opening, it sets a completely different tone than Disposable Teens does. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I've had, I got the director's notes, and because he talks about it extensively on his commentary, and I was managed to re-edit the film properly. And I've shown it to friends of mine who hated the movie, the theatrical movie. And they watched it and they're like, you're right. They're like, it is a completely different movie. And I'm hoping that one day Shout Factory or somebody will pick it up and fix it, because I think that, Joe Berlinger really deserves to get the attention, that he did make a good movie. And the other thing too, one of the cool things is doing this, being is that I am more positive about movies. I've gotten contacted by a lot of people who were involved in the movie, actors, directors, special effects guys, who have sent me emails and messages and, thanking me for taking the time to give this movie its, due. It's like, thank you for bringing the attention to this, because it really deserves it. We put a lot of passion and work into it, and so many people don't know the full story of what went on behind it. So in the case of the Blair Witch 2, I got contacted by a producer who worked with Myers and Myrick and Sanchez, who were the creators of the Blair Witch, and they had taken that video and along with some other stuff, this was a few years back now, and went to Lionsgate, who owned the Blair Witch license, and they were like, we want to release the part 2 as it should be, and they were really getting stonewalled. And it come to find out later, the reason why was because they wanted to wipe the slate of 2 and do the reboot sequel that was Blair Witch, that came out earlier or later last year, that ended up being exactly the movie that everybody didn't like when Blair Witch 1 came out, and they were like, well, let's just remake Blair Witch 1. That the Blair Witch movie was exactly that, only because I've talked to people who hated the first Blair Witch movie who liked Blair Witch, and then vice versa. So they essentially made a Blair Witch movie for people who hated the Blair Witch Project.
What a weird quest to go on.
It really, really was, and it's a shame. I bought the DVD, and I'm thinking about doing a video on it, but more or less talking about like what they did wrong, like how, because like it really didn't go over and nearly as well as it should have, because it was a mess. And it sucks because I really like the writer and director. They made 2 amazing films together, and I thought that this was going to be, I'm like, oh my God, them doing a Blair Witch movie is going to be incredible. And it was one of the biggest disappointments of last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I there was a really interesting story that floated up online where I saw that they recorded the commentary to Blair Witch, and someone did a review of it saying that the commentary is profoundly strange because it was right in the aftermath of the movie failing. and they're pretty hostile on the commentary, right? And they recorded it at the wrong time. And Simon Barrett actually retweeted the review and sort of endorsed it and said, "This is fair." Like, and so you can tell he's a thoughtful, smart guy, right? And self-aware. It's so weird how it turned out.
Yeah, they recorded the commentary maybe I think like 2 weeks after the movie hit theaters, and they were somewhat jovial about it, but you could taste the bitterness. Because at one point, what did they say? They were like, well, the movie didn't. It was something like the movie didn't make any money, but at least we have a pile of terrible reviews to go along with it.
Oh wow!
Oh man, that's
well, it's weird too, because that's one of the things I really love about what you do and the positivity of it. Because, like, I just watched a documentary about the making of Pet Sematary that I really liked. It's called Unearthed and Untold, and you really get the sense that the people making these movies, a lot of times, as an entire unit, they take it so personally, and they're so invested. They're basically trying to cast a spell, right? And to have people just tear it apart without knowing the context of why maybe it wasn't as good as it could have been, it must suck for them.
yeah.
Yeah, it's got to really stink because I've worked on little nothing productions, and even that you're putting your time and effort, and it's somebody's idea, it's somebody's vision that's going into this, and in some movies just aren't going to turn out good. I mean, you either have somebody who is just not a good director, or somebody who's just not creative, or you get people that they are going into this for the wrong reason. I think there are a lot of movies that are made simply because somebody has a story to tell, and then you have other movies that are made because they're like, hey, robots are popular right now, let's make a movie about robots, so like that, there's no passion behind it. Or I got an idea, hey, what if monster trucks, it was a truck that had a monster in it, and brilliant, here's $150 million.
I knew that was the movie that was going to come up. I knew it. So I'm curious, because I love your reviews. I just watched the one for Split and the Bye Bye Man. I'm curious, in your opinion, what takes a movie and puts it in the bad category? Is it like the Rotten Tomatoes scores or the box office revenue? What makes it bad?
Well, what do you mean? Like, bad as in like that I think it's a genuinely bad movie, or is like a movie that I think is good but is generally regarded as bad?
So I would say like a movie that would warrant a episode in the Exploring series.
Ah, okay. I guess it's something where probably a combination of things, like because I don't. I mean, I know I reference it a few times, but I don't particularly like Rotten Tomatoes because too many people use that as like this barometer for whether or not a movie is good. And I'm more from the camp of, if you think that the movie looks good and you want to see it, then check it out. Like, don't let this one website be, the be-all, end-all of whether or not something's good, because there have been a lot of movies on there that are praised and get the fresh rating and all that I've seen that I thought were absolute garbage. And it seems that a lot of the it's almost guaranteed that a horror movie is going to get a bad rating on there, unless it's something like The Witch that somehow kind of transcends that, because it's almost an artsy movie, and I love The Witch. I thought The Witch was great, but that was a movie that I'm not surprised. But if you're going to get something, let me think, what is a good recent horror film? Well, the problem is we haven't really gotten a lot of R-rated horror movies as of late. So I think that that also was kind of factoring in. We get a lot of these, aimed at the PG-13 crowd. I think that horror movies almost are guaranteed to get like mediocre ratings.
There's a lot of discrimination against horror movies. The movie we paired with Late Phases is one of my favorites, which is Wolfen.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I looked it up, and the damn thing's like 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. It should be like 98. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Well, going back to The Thing, what I mentioned in the one video, when the original well, not the original, but the remake that John Carpenter did that came out in the 80s, that originally got trashed. Like really trashed. Mm-hmm. The director who did the original movie came out and said how much he hated it. And then you had, Roger Ebert saying that it was terrible, and a whole bunch of other critics from the time coming out and saying how it was just an awful movie. And Carpenter was really upset because that movie was one of his biggest passion projects, and he loved it. And seeing all these critics come out and say how terrible it is, it really hit him, and it bummed him out for a while. And it's a shame. Now, thankfully, he's been long since vindicated that it is one of like the best horror movies of all time. Actually, not even one of the best horror movies, one of the best movies of all time. Mm-hmm. But it's just that back then you had so many people that were all ready to jump on top of it because E.T. was huge at the time, and people didn't want the like mutating monster that was killing everything in its path. They wanted the happy, friendly alien.
They wanted Reese's Pieces.
Yeah, they wanted Reese's Pieces, and they got they got a punch in the face. So I think that going back to answering the question, I don't really like Rotten Tomatoes all that much because I think that too many people listen to them. So a lot of times I will see something that I think is getting a bad rap, or if I see if I see another like video review critic or something that's really trashing a movie, I like to kind of give it its due, or just something that I really like, something that I want to talk about, something that I want to share with the world. Like I'll stumble upon something and I'll be like, oh my God, this movie is great. How come nobody's talking about it? And so I'll do a video on that. And then consequently, I get all these people that are saying, oh my God, I didn't know this movie existed. This is awesome. Like I did videos on Scanners 2 and 3. And I had all these people that are like, I didn't know that there were sequels to Scanners. And I'm like, did you know that there was 2 and then 2 spin-offs of that? And they're like, what? So awesome. It's opening a lot of people's eyes to stuff that they might not have heard of.
Yeah, you blew their minds, which is
I blew their minds.
For Scanners.
So how much research? I know you mentioned Blair Witch 2 took about 2 months. But how much research do you usually put into an exploring series? Was Blair Witch like the exception because there was just
and
so
without
much
giving away trade secrets, like what's the process? Like you must have sources you go to.
It depends. It's it's kind of a variety of things. For like a regular Good Bad Flicks episode, that I can usually takes me about a week. Sometimes it'll take me 2 weeks. But for an exploring episode, it could take anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple months because that I like to put as much into it as I can find, as much as I can dig up. The thing is, because I get a lot of people that are like, why are you doing the Good Bad Flicks episodes where, you're just kind of picking apart a movie? And I'm like, well, when I'm doing those, it's twofold. Number one, I'm doing it because it is a fun way to bring certain movies to people's attention that they would not have seen or heard of otherwise. And two, because it gives me more time to work on an exploring episode. I wouldn't be able to release an episode every week if I was doing an exploring episode every week. It's just there's too much work that goes into them. And so that kind of is a little bit of a buffer there. As far as how I do the research on them, it is as I said, it's a combination of things. Director's commentaries behind the scenes. I also have some people in the industry that like to talk about their movies, but they don't want credit. You know, they're like, I really want to talk about what happened, but I don't want anyone to, I don't want my name attached to this, but I have to get the story out. I have tons and tons and tons of old magazines, old Fangorias and stuff that have information in them. And then, your various garden variety Google searches, go and look up stuff that way and try to verify it as best as possible. And so it's really just a big combination of things. It's always nice when I get the information directly from the source, but sometimes the source isn't always available. So, then I kind of look elsewhere and see what I can dig up.
So with all the research that you do, what's the craziest thing you discovered about a film during an exploring series?
As of right now, the craziest thing he's discovered is Scanners 3 existed. As far as I'm concerned, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I mean, I remembered I used to watch them on cable all the time, and I just was so excited.
It's making me want to go find out if there's like a Rabid 2 or a Sisters 3 or what else did Brian De Palma's franchise that I didn't know about.
Well, if you've ever seen my videos on La Casa, which was the was it Italian? No, it was the Spanish spin-off of The Evil Dead. So there's actually 7 Evil Deads.
Oh, wow. Oh, no.
I've been missing out this whole time. Are you kidding me?
That have nothing to do with Ash or any, but it's, I love finding
There's
that.
a whole roving tribe of Evil Dead we didn't know about. It's messed up.
Yeah. There's just all these movies. It's like, what? This may not be the craziest thing, but this is probably a really good one. Mm-hmm. The Crow City of Angels, the original cut was close to 3 hours long, and it was a completely different movie. Wow. It had the same basic concept, but it was the execution. I had somebody the other day that was like, this is the same movie. And I'm like, well, it's because, again, the director had filmed the whole movie, and he did it the way that he wanted to. And he actually, he knew Harvey Weinstein had he's infamous for cutting 20 minutes out of every movie. So he actually he made the movie longer knowing that like 20 minutes would come out of it. So, but when they saw the final, the director's cut, it was like, well, this is too different from, the Crow movie. We wanted more or less a carbon copy of the original with different characters. And so they went and re-edited it and reshot some stuff and made it into like kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole. And everybody ended up not liking it because of that. And so the director had since saw my review and posted it on his website and said, aside from some minor things here and there, he said, this is about 95% how it all happened. And so that was me like, yes! Because I'm human. I get stuff wrong. Mm-hmm. I even as much research as I do, just sometimes wires get crossed. I maybe say something wrong, mix something up, and maybe something isn't right. But I try to strive to get things as close to 100% factual as I can. And so coming right from the director that this is pretty much what happened really was pretty exciting. And because one of my fans was like, oh my God, did you see this? And I went and I'm like, oh yeah, oh my God, the director saw my video. And so that was really cool. And the fact that he really liked that. I know Mosquito was a video that I did, and that's a great one. I had a friend of mine who he worked on that. He did some of the effects. He did a whole bunch of stuff on that. And at one point, while they were filming, they were having, I think it was close to the end of the shoot. and a bunch of the crew and everybody were downstairs, and they were resting because there was a good few hours before they were going to start filming again. And somebody had on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Gunnar Hansen was in Mosquito. He was playing one of the villains who ended up being a good guy. But anyway, they were playing the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre downstairs. And Gunnar Hansen came down and started watching it with them and then started like commentating on the movie. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be quiet." And they're like, "No, we're going to start this movie over again and listen to you do a live commentary of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre." So the whole crew, well, not the whole crew, but everybody that was there got to sit down and listen to a live commentary with Gunnar Hansen talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I'm like, my buddy was like, that was one of the greatest like days of my life.
That's awesome. It makes the whole movie worth it.
12 hours on set. Who cares? We got to watch Texas Chainsaw with Gunnar Hansen. Oh,
yeah,
that is really cool.
Imagine.
Oh,
So-
it just was awesome.
So we get the feeling that Harvey Weinstein is a serial wrecker of movies. Are there other serial wreckers of horror movies out there that we should know about and call out?
Well, well, the thing with Weinstein is it's not just horror. Like he
Right.
is notorious for also ruining foreign films. There was a time probably around when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was like a hit. And so he started buying up all of these like foreign properties and bringing them over. But the problem was that in his mind, they weren't really accessible to an American audience. So what they would do is they would take the film and completely rewrite the dialogue, edit the film to fit into whatever box they figured, say it's a 2-hour movie, they would trim it down to like an hour and a half and record the dubbed in lines and edit the film together to now follow this story that was completely different. He did that with a movie called Shaolin Soccer. That is it's a comedy. It's hilarious if you've never seen it. It's really, really silly and fun, but make sure you watch the original import subtitled version and not the Weinstein release, because the Weinstein release, I believe it's about a half hour shorter, and it is a completely different story than what the real movie is. Like it's baffling. And there was, I don't think Weinstein did this one. I think MTV did one. There was a movie, Volcano High. Again, it was about a 2-hour movie. And for some reason, what they thought would be really funny is if MTV re-edited the film and all the actors in the movie, they had their lines dubbed by famous rappers. So you had like Snoop Dogg and Redman and all these people dubbing these lines, and they edited the movie again to kind of make like sense to an American audience, but it ended up making no sense whatsoever. And then you see like these Asian people with like Snoop Dogg's voice, and I'm like, what is this? So Weinstein is terrible, and MTV was terrible. Thankfully, I think that was the only time they ever did that. But
I can't. Why it hadn't become a pattern? I mean, look how successful that would have been.
Yeah, I know. People are just clamoring for more of that. I mean, especially when you've got hits like Soul Plane. I mean, why wouldn't you make more movies with rappers? And How High? Yes, these movies are. So even I have my limits.
That's good.
Like, I mean, I love to praise movies, but because I have people that like. They come on the channel and they'll watch a couple of videos and they're like, this guy loves everything, hates nothing. And I'm like, well, that's because like I'm talking about the stuff that I'm passionate about. I'm talking about the movies that I enjoy. If you want to see me talk negatively about something, I am doing, just last year I started doing like reviews of current movies in theaters and on video on demand. And of course, in that case, I'm going to watch something that I'm not going to like. I mean, there's always a chance that there's going to be something that I don't like. But if you're just watching my regular videos, why would I spend 2 months researching something that I don't like? Yeah.
You're not a masochist. That's
No, not at all. Although although sometimes some of the movies that you'd get people that are like, well, how many times did you have to watch Howard the Duck? And I'm like, well, maybe a little too much.
This question might actually not be answerable, but I'm just curious if you ever found the concept flipped where there was an intervention from outside, not the director or like a production team or something, that you think actually improved a movie.
It happens. It's rare, but it happens. A good example, the one that usually comes to mind, is in the original Star Wars. Han Solo was going to be a talking fish.
What?
Wow.
And the studio, I don't remember, either one of the producers or somebody involved came to George Lucas and said, no. It's like, look, you've already got a 9-foot tall dog, Chewbacca, and it's like you're going to need to have this character of Han Solo needs to be somebody that the audience can relate to. Mm-hmm. So they ended up, going with Harrison Ford, and of course, legendary character. But I believe if he ended up being that, it would be like silly. So I think that is a case of where a studio intervention really did fix things. I know there's been other instances. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know like sometimes it just so happens you get a director that's a little overzealous or here's another one that the Stuff, the video I just did not that long ago, Larry Cohen, who directed it, this is kind of a good and bad. The original cut of the film he put out, the studio didn't like that right after the intro, it went into a bunch of fake commercials for the Stuff. So they wanted them like peppered throughout the movie instead of kind of stockpiled at the beginning. And I think that maybe if they would have ran a couple of commercials in the beginning and then went off into the movie, it might have worked a little bit better. But so that was the thing that they changed that I don't think worked. What they did change that did work later on in the movie, Michael Moriarty and the girl whose name escapes me, they develop a romance. So he said that there was a lot more of their relationship in the movie. And the studio said that that was slowing the film down, that they wanted it cut out. So they cut that out. And he actually, a couple years ago, had a screening of the film, which was his director's cut. And he put those scenes back in. He said watching it with an audience, he agreed. He was like, yeah, they made the right call. It does really slow the film down. So yeah, I mean, sometimes the studios do get it right.
Yeah, when it's the most obvious stop the talking fish choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really. Han Solo talking fish. What? Can you imagine?
Well, I sort of could relate to the singing fish in The Sopranos, so maybe it wouldn't have been that bad.
Somewhere Lucas was like, I'll put my talking fish in here somewhere. Wait.
Yeah, I believe. Well, he did. He actually did. In Return of the Jedi, when Lando Calrissian and Nien Nunb, because Nien Nunb is essentially what Han Solo would have been.
Mm. Oh my god!
And yeah, it's just. I mean, he's a great, funny side character, but not as not the roguish Han Solo that we all. I mean, but it's also weird because you never know. I mean, if you go back and look at who some of the original castings were, you think of something of how it is now, and you've had years with it. But think about it back then. I mean, it might have Christopher Walken could have been Han Solo. Who was Nick Nolte was supposed to be Han Solo. So you never know how it might have turned out in an alternate universe.
I think I know how Nick Nolte would turn out.
The one thing I wanted to ask is, it seems like with most films, it seems like that horror seems to have the most problems somewhere in their pipeline, more so than any other films traditionally, like with either it be the production, but most times it seems to be the producers. Like 9 times out of 10 with the videos that we watch, it's usually like, hey, this is a great film, until a producer came along and said something. Why do you think that is? Why is it that horror films seem to get chopped up, pun intended, more than any other types of film?
Well, a lot of times what happens is you have a producer who is looking at horror from a monetary standpoint. Horror is traditionally an easy moneymaker. That's why there are so many horror films, because you get people that will get their start in horror. I mean, there's been so many actors and directors and whatnot. I mean, Charlize Theron's first movie was Children of the Corn 3, I believe. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of actors and producers and directors and whatnot that will start in horror and then kind of move on to other things. And as far as the producers are concerned, they're looking at it from a monetary standpoint. Okay, well, we've invested $5 million into this movie, and there was another movie that came along that cost $5 million, but it was PG-13, and that made all the money. Mm-hmm. So even though we put our money into this movie and we let the director film it this way, they're like, well, if we edit it down to PG-13, we can release it in theaters and it'll do really well. And then what we can do is double dip and release it, R-rated or unrated on Blu-ray and DVD. And then we'll make even more money because the people will want to see the real version of the movie. Well, the downside to that is that a lot of times in a case of something like Stay Alive, they'll release the movie PG-13 into theaters, the movie will bomb, and then the studio doesn't want to front the money to fix it and then release it on DVD. So they'll release it they'll release the PG-13 version. And then with Stay Alive, it did go a little bit further. They did release the unrated cut, but it was unfinished. So there were a lot of effect shots that weren't completed because they didn't put the money into it, because they had cut the budget, because they wanted it to be, PG-13. They're like, well, why are we going to dump money into, these scenes that are never going to make it into this cut? So that was really frustrating because it's actually like a nifty little fun horror movie. And the studio really butchered that. I mean, they took out an entire character in the movie. Wow. That like 3/4 into the movie, this character shows up and more or less explains everything that happened. Well, because of the way that she dies, they completely removed the character that explains everything that's going on in the movie. So a lot of people saw the PG-13 cut and they're like, this movie doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, it's because they removed the person who explained everything.
Absurd. You're doing something actually really cool on your website that I like. You're doing a survey of your followers for what episodes they want to see in 2017. And I love this list that's coming up here.
Number 2, I was eyeballing that this morning. I was like, hey now, how you doing?
How'd you get the idea, and how exciting is it that you're getting all these cool responses, right?
Well, what happened was, I think this is the 6th year I'm doing this. Every day I get, hey, you got to do this movie. Hey, you have to do this movie. And I want to do them all, but I'm one person. Like I get a lot of people that are like, well, could you tell the team? And I'm like, team? I'm like, dude, I'm one person writing, editing, doing all this, my research, everything myself. So I'm like, if I had a team, it'd be great. But so what I did was I started getting so many, requests. Hey, you got to do this movie. Hey, you got to do this movie. So I started to compile this thing I just call the list. And as of currently, I think there's 1,400 and some odd movies on the list. And
good luck.
Yeah, I know, exactly. God, maybe if I live to be 900, I'll be able to make them all. But they keep adding to it. So
you need the main character from The Split. He could be your team.
Exactly. I could. Yeah, a bunch of us can do this. So I was like, okay, well, probably the best way for me to kind of give back, because I had a lot of people that are like, hey, you want to do this? So I would take a look at how, the movies that were requested over the course of the year. And I would take the 15 most requested movies over the course of the year. And then I put them up on my site and give people a chance to poll. Hey, originally I gave them, pick your top 4. Mm-hmm. And then I changed that to 5. And so I said, pick your top 5 that you want me to do, and then I will do them. And it's a great barometer for seeing what people really want to see. Because, for example, this year was a big surprise. I had an overwhelming amount of people telling me that they wanted to see me do an episode on Streets of Fire. Mm-hmm. But when I put the list up, I was like, hey, vote on what you want to see. List of, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be, in the top 5. And it didn't, I don't even think it made it in the top 10. So I was kind of shocked with that. So what I do, the other thing that's nice is I'll take the list, I'll look at the most, requested videos, and I'll do the top 5. And then, I'll do them. I used to do them in January, but what happened was YouTube, and this is where I kind of get into the whole money aspect of it. Originally, when I was doing this, I was doing it more or less for the fun of it. I was making like no money, so I didn't really pay attention to the analytics and all that stuff. Once I started doing this full time, like this became my career, I had to start paying attention to, money and where things are coming from, what's popular, what's not, what works, what doesn't. And what happens is every year on YouTube, a lot of companies will put a lot of ad revenue in November and December. So most people that make videos will put a lot of stuff out in November and December, and they'll make a lot of money on their ad revenue. And then consequently, because of that, January and February, the ad revenue drops significantly. So you could be getting more views, but you'll make less money. Oh, wow. So much so that you get a lot of people that a lot of the really larger YouTubers will just take January off. Mm-hmm. They'll put out like 1 or 2 videos. They won't put out like a lot. Or what they'll do is over the course of January, they'll make a crap load of videos and then release them all in like February, or release them all in March, and and then consequently make the lion's share of money because the ad revenues jump back up. And so what I did was last year was I had used to work for a school in Philadelphia. I was a video editor for a college, and I got laid off in the middle of 2015. Mm-hmm. And after I got laid off, I had a couple of months of severance, and I talked to my wife, and I was like, look, I'm kind of at like a teetering point. If I'm ever going to make this work, like now's the time. And so she agreed, and I started doing this full time, and thankfully it was successful, and I was able to make this my job. So January rolls around. It was the first year where it was really like where I was paying attention. I did all these videos that people wanted to see, and I had really high views, but really low revenue. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to, I used to call it All Request January. Now I just call it All Request Month. So I take the requests, and then what I'll do is I'm going to put the most requested videos out in March, and then kind of pepper the remaining episodes, the other 10 videos that people want to see, and I'll put them out over the course of the year. Probably, more of the focused horror films I'll put out like closer to Halloween and stuff, because those, you're going to get more views on horror movies around Halloween, even though I do them all year round. But that's that whole thing. But
that's really cool.
It's great.
It's exciting from our podcast standpoint. Like the top 5 are basically horror, right? I don't know if that happens every time you do it, but it's really cool. I would be so psyched to see an episode on From Beyond.
Yeah, From Beyond is a movie I've been wanting to do for a while. I'm kind of surprised it took me this long. I'm always surprised when I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this episode. And then like 3 years later, I'm like, yeah, I'm still going to do this episode.
It's in the pipeline.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, sometimes things too, I did a video on Night of the Comet. And sometimes I'll start working on something and it just doesn't feel right. And so I'm like, you know what? Now's not the right time. And I'll put it aside and I'll come back to it. And I think Night of the Comet, I came back to like a year later and did it. So that's kind of the thing with some of these where I'll start working on them and I'll just be like, no, it's just not. And then I'll set it aside and I'll come back to it later and then release it. So because what happened was years ago, I did a video where it felt wrong, but I just kind of forced it through anyway, and it came out and it really sucked. And so that was when I was like, okay, if ever I feel like it's not working, I'm going to put it aside and come back to it later.
Oh, cool. That actually leads to my next question, which was I saw a cool video essay from Every Frame of Painting, and he was talking about how he's gotten better at doing video essays and kind of shows you like some techniques behind the scenes or like whatever. So is there things that you've changed in the way you make the videos that you think are improvements or different from when you started?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I've upgraded my equipment a lot, which makes a big difference because there's a lot, like whenever I get somebody who messages me and they're like, hey, I want to start making videos. What advice can you give me? And I always tell them the first thing that they need to worry about is audio. Because there's been so many videos where I'll tune in and the audio is just reprehensibly bad. And it's a shame because I think that the content is good. But if you tune in and the audio is bad, that is the first thing that is going to turn people off and make them not come back. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, you really want to make sure that your audio is good. I'm like, that is the most important thing. I'm like, everything else will come. And I'm like, don't expect to be good out of the gate. You're like, my first year sucked. Like my first year, the episodes were on Blip, and Blip went away, and consequently the episodes went away. I still have hard copies of them, or not hard copy, but I still have copies of them, on my computer. And people are like, "Oh, just put them on YouTube," and I'm like, "No, I don't want anyone to hear this. They're terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. Editing's bad. The audio's bad. Everything's terrible." So. I think as far as the quality of it, as far as like what I've done differently, I've gotten better equipment. I've learned how to make the audio better. My editing quality has increased. I've done a better pacing. I've learned how to get rid of dead spots. I've also learned how to talk. Like one of my biggest things, it's another thing. I think some reviewers get out there and they talk with radio voice. They get, and I hate that. So I just talk in my natural voice. And I think that really lends a lot to the uniqueness of what I do, that people feel like they're listening to a friend talking about movies as opposed to somebody telling them about movies. So I really like that. I like that comparison, because that's really all it's what I really started doing. It was just me talking about movies and letting friends of mine know about it, and it kind of expanded from there. And so that was a big thing. I've also I did a video for Cabin in the Woods, and that went viral, which was really exciting. I've had a couple of videos go viral since then, and it's funny though, like my viral videos getting hundreds of thousands of views is awesome. Is so exciting. But then like I look at somebody like PewDiePie, who he'll put a video of him in a car talking about nothing and get like 10 million views. And it's just like, oh, I put a lot of work into this. And not saying that he doesn't put a lot of work into his stuff. He does, but sure. Like it's just such a different thing where it's like I had to get a video go viral and show up on like 50 gazillion different websites to get this. He just uploads it and it takes off on its own. But anyway, that video did really well, and consequently, it afforded me the luxury of being able to buy I have a friend of mine who she is just a computer genius and helped me to build a really sweet computer. So that Cabin in the Woods video pretty much paid for my badass rig.
Oh, that's awesome.
Is helping me, because that was one of the things, like when I was when I was starting out, I was using like, just a regular computer. And I mean, I had a better editing computer at work. So sometimes I would go in on like weekends and edit. But working from home, my computer was just so slow. And I had people that are like, why don't you edit at the time? Why don't you edit HD footage? I'm like, because my computer can't handle it. Like, God, I'm doing 50 gig files. Are you nuts? So now, thankfully, with the new machine, I'm be able to, my workflow is much faster, and it just little things you pick up. You do something often enough. I forget what the ratio is. It's something, do something for 10,000 hours, and you're an expert or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really a lot. I mean, if you were to like. I've gone back and looked at my older episodes, and they're just so awful. And then I go and I look at my new episodes, and they're much better.
So then my other question, I guess, is speaking of the 10,000 hours, like one of the things I guess I'm lucky as a horror fan goes, I hear a lot of horror fans complain that through oversaturation, they're just too jaded, right? Nothing scares them anymore. It doesn't really impact them anymore. That hasn't really happened to me, but I mean, I can't even imagine, like, you're like a surgeon of movie watching. Like, you're seeing all the pieces and parts, right? So do horror movies still scare you? Can they still get to you? Or is it just the sheer volume of it is made it so where you have a thick skin?
It depends. Some movies, like, they'll have scary moments, but I won't get really scared. Every now and then something will come along that will just terrify me because I have a couple of hot button things. I don't like ghosts and I don't like bugs. So if there's a movie that has bugs creep me out more than scare me. Like, I just get like uncomfortable, and you get that like, I don't know what the technical term is, but you get that feel like when you're watching a movie and there's like a million roaches, you get that feeling like something's crawling up your arm and you're like, So that is more an uncomfortable, just creepy thing. But ghosts scare the hell out of me. So way back in 2007, I was lucky enough to get into a early screening of Paranormal Activity, the original. And this was the non-tampered with version with the original ending. Mm-hmm. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we went and saw it. And it scared the shit out of both of us. And I'm not even kidding. Like people are like, oh, that movie's not scary. We slept with the lights on like children. We were terrified. Awesome. And so I remember, I was telling all these people, oh my God, you have to see this movie's incredible. And then, years later, it finally got released. And then I was incredibly bummed because Spielberg, his DreamWorks, I believe, had bought the rights, and originally what they were going to do is they were going to remake it, and so many people had seen it and were like, "No, you can't remake this. This is too good." And so he had agreed, okay, we're not going to remake this, but the original ending, it just needs more punch. So he gave what they call the Spielberg suggested ending, and that was the ending that they showed in theaters. And then they shot another ending, which stunk. And when they released the movie on Blu-ray and DVD, there was the original ending, there was the Spielberg suggested ending, and then there was the alternate ending. And they did not include the original ending on the DVD. So like if you didn't see it in theaters, you're not seeing the original ending. I mean, it's on like YouTube and whatnot, but I mean, you're getting just the ending. You're not getting the context of the build up to the ending. So I've had people that are like, well, what's the original ending? And I'm like, well, it's out there on YouTube. And then they watch it. They're like, well, that's not scary. It's like, well, it's because you didn't have a 90-minute lead up that got to that point. You're just watching that out of context. So yeah, I mean, stuff still affects me. The original Blair Witch Project creeped me out. I had a buddy of mine who was terrified. I was really scared of it. But like I had a friend of mine who he actually got like mad. He like we went and saw it, and after it was over, he's just like, I don't like movies like that.
So hit him deep.
Oh, he got really terrified. So yeah, but that scared me. There's every now and then there'll be something that really gets to me, and I figure, as I said, bugs and ghosts scare me out. So scare me really bad. So if somebody ever makes a movie about ghost bugs, I will just be hiding forever. It sounds like something the Asylum would do, though.
It does. It totally does.
Ghost bug NATO.
It's making me think of Mimic, actually.
Oh yeah, Mimic creeped me out really bad. Mimic was good, but yeah, well, Mimic got a little. I enjoyed it, but Mimic got a little silly with the kid with the what was it? Wacky shoes or Mr. Funk, because he knew the humans from the bugs because of their shoes.
The one thing I noticed in your two latest reviews, the Bye Bye Man and Split, that I watched this morning, both PG-13, but Bye Bye Man obviously sucking pretty hard, and Split getting pretty good reviews. And I'm just curious, in your opinion, what made Split a better film? Since they're both in the PG realm, I feel like they probably both had the same producer treatment. And does it give you hope for PG-13 horror films, which I know is probably a no?
well, here's the thing. There are good PG-13 horror films. Mm-hmm. The thing is, it is coming down again from the production. If the movie sets out to be a PG-13 horror film, then usually they'll fare a lot better than movies that are shot to be R-rated and then cut back to be PG-13. That's the problem. That was one of the things that happened with the Bye Bye Man. That actually did have producer involvement. What happened, the Bye Bye Man was shot to be an R-rated film. And then the studio, I remember, I'm pretty sure it was Hardcore Henry, which I saw in a theater, and I saw the trailer for the Bye Bye Man, and I thought it looked interesting. I thought the name was so terrible, but I was willing to.
I don't know how that got past anybody. It's the most palpably ridiculous name for a horror movie you could come up with. You'd have to work to have it be that bad.
It really is. It's so bad. And the thing is, it's based on a short story called The Bridge to Body Island. Why wouldn't you call it The Bridge to Body Island? That's so much better than the Bye Bye Man. So, but the thing was, when they first announced it, it came out, and I'm almost positive that they said that it was rated R, and then it got delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and I think it was supposed to be out sometime over the summer, and then it didn't come out until January. And what happened in between those times was that they decided that they needed to edit the film down to PG-13, but they had a few things that they had to take out of the film, and they reshot some scenes, and consequently, that was what the movie suffered from. I think that the movie, in and of itself, I thought conceptually was okay, but it would have at least been an enjoyable, bad horror movie if there was a little bit of blood and guts and some of the stuff that was in there, because you could tell the scenes that got edited because they were so choppy. And that really, maybe because I'm an editor, it sticks out a little bit more, but there's a lot of times where I'm watching a movie and I'm like, well, there was the edit, and then consequently, sometimes when the movie gets released on DVD and they'll, put out the whole version, you watch it and I'm like, okay, exactly. I was right. But, so with the Bye Bye Man, the reason why I didn't like it, on top of the aforementioned reasons, the one character, Sasha, who is the lead character's girlfriend, she's one of the worst actresses I've ever seen. And seriously, it's almost worth seeing the movie to see how bad she is. There's a point in the movie where she finds out that they're all going to die. And she's like, oh my God, so in any other movie, you'd have an actress who at the very least would just break down in tears and whatnot. She puts her hands over her mouth and is like, oh my God, what is happening?
Oh
like
no.
with that flat a delivery, and she gets sick early on in the movie. And if you've ever, when like a kid is doing like the fake cough to get out of school, like so she's sick and she's like, I don't feel well. And I'm like, are you kidding me? She was terrible. So yeah, the Bye Bye Man had a lot of things going against it. The PG-13 was just part of the problem. Now, with Split was the kind of movie where it was PG-13 because it didn't need to be R. It was a psychological film more than there was violence. So that was really why that was the way that it was. Like there's been a remake that was actually good, The Ring with Naomi Watts, which was PG-13. And that's a genuinely scary film. They did a really good job with that because they took the basic idea from Ringu and adapted it, made it different. So you could kind of watch the two movies and actually get two similar but different experiences. And I like that. Like that's a really good example of a PG-13 horror film that is scary and done well.
That's
and
really impressive sleight of hand. I would have never guessed Ring was PG-13. I would have assumed it was R, just from memory, right?
Yeah.
Like there's graphic stuff that's really cool.
Yeah, they're really well. Also, the thing was too, like if actually, let me look up when that was released because I think that was it was 2002. So that was released before PG-13 changed in 2004. So that's what they were able to get away with a little bit more. But even still, like if you go back and watch it, there's a lot of stuff that happens that's really unsettling and uncomfortable, but it's nothing really gory or just like, I mean, you've got, when they find the kids that, have died after the 7 days, it's just they're twisted and disfigured, but they're not bloody. They're not decapitated or anything. So it's really just more psychological. And the stuff that's going on. It's funny the way that that studios will work with things. Like there was this is going into R-rated territory, but Running Scared, the Paul Walker movie, there was a scene that took place in a ice skating rink, and they were really worried that they were going to get an NC-17 for the scene because there was so much blood. But the thing was, because they were filming in an ice skating rink that was lit by black lights, the blood looked purple. And when they sent that off to get the rating, they came back and they said that it was okay. They're like, if the blood was red, then they would have gotten an NC-17, but because the blood was not red, then it was okay, and they got the R rating.
Oh, weird.
So
That is so cool.
it just goes to show how silly the ratings board can be.
Yeah,
Like,
That's really weird. What the hell? Well, like that's one movie that really gets under my skin and unsettles me is Mulholland Drive, and I don't even know if that's R or PG-13, but like I can see when you're doing psychological impact more than the physical, then you're gonna be able to come in under a PG-13 rating more easily, right, and still be unsettling.
Yeah, if you're showing like just traumatic things and because that was the thing with Split. What Split was like they were pushing. I did feel like they were pushing the boundaries of it. I really thought that they were skirting the edges of PG-13. There wasn't any really ridiculous graphic violence. There were a couple of scenes that maybe could have gone on for a couple of frames longer, but it didn't feel chopped to bits like some PG-13 films were. So I think that's also factoring into them getting their PG-13. And quite frankly, it's not everything needs a PG-13 rating. Although it's funny, this week I'm working on Christine, the John Carpenter movie, and when they put the movie together the first time, they were afraid, showing how far we've come, they were afraid that they were going to get a PG because at the time PG-13 didn't exist. And they were like, oh my God, nobody's going to go see a PG Stephen King movie. So they went and they were like, okay, well, nobody's going to go see a PG-13 movie, and we can't do any more like effects or anything. So they added like some extra fucks in there to make sure that they would get an R rating. And I'm like, wow, that's hilarious. You know, they went the other direction.
That's crazy. That is one of my favorite movies. That's so cool that to know that was. But you're right. I mean, there's just not a lot of graphic violence in it, right?
There's not a lot of graphic violence. There's some stuff in there that's like bad, but like not like you don't really see anything really bad. Like there's some, like The Thing. Okay, they absolutely positively got in their R rating, but Christine, I think the worst part in the movie is when the one bully gets run over by Christine when she's on fire, and it leaves like the flaming corpse behind. But even that, like, there's no blood. You don't see him actually get run over. Mm-hmm. So, I could see, and back in the day, I mean, you look at something like Poltergeist, that Poltergeist, would absolutely get an R rating today. Mm-hmm. And it just reinforces that because you go and you watch the remake of Poltergeist, the PG-13 pile of crap, and that was the most bland, milquetoast, CG infested, terrible movie that wasn't even remotely scary, had nothing even coming close to being as fearful as the first one. The original Poltergeist scared the crap out of me.
Out of all of the things I've learned about productions, that's probably the best problem I've ever heard of a movie having, is watching and going, oh, we got some fucks in there. Grab the mic, dude. We got to do this.
It's happened a couple of times. I can't think of it, but I know there's been a few times where they were afraid because, before PG-13 came around, where they're just like, this isn't dirty enough. Like our audience isn't going to want to go see this, so they had to add language or throw in a little bit of extra blood or something to make sure, to guarantee that they get their R rating.
Or change the blood from purple to red.
Yeah, exactly. We've got green blood. You got to make it red. And so they went and changed things, and it's so funny because now everybody is just trying so hard to get PG-13. If you've never seen it, there's a documentary called "This Film Is Not Yet Rated."
Yes,
and it's so good. It just shows the hypocrisy of how the ratings board works. And a good story that they had was the one about the South Park movie, where they would, because what happened was they would send it off to get ratings, and the studio, would come back from the ratings board, and they would be like, well, we need you to remove, this word. And so what they would do is they'd remove that word and then add like 50 more shits, or like throw in like other. And finally, I think after like the 8th time of them going back and forth and just adding more and more filth to it, they finally were like, all right, you got an R rating. But it was hilarious. So the funny thing is, the ratings board actually made the South Park movie dirtier because of that.
That's messed up. The author that we had on, John Towson, he told an interesting story about the cut that was made with Frankenstein throwing the girl in the water, and how the cut made the implication of the scene worse, right? Like, where because of where they cut, the whole scene played is really weird, and it made Frankenstein kind of pervy, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of like just showing what it was. So they just don't know what they're doing when they do these things. It's so random.
Yeah, they make really odd decisions where they insist that things have to get removed, or they'll, oh, well, I really like this, but you need to take this out, and then what? Or my personal favorite, there's a lot of times where you'll get a producer that doesn't understand the movie, so he'll want something removed, and it's like, well, no, that's the whole point of the movie, and they'll remove it and release it in theaters, and audiences will go see it, and they'll be like, well, the movie was going along really well until this happened, and
yeah.
And then you just see the director like, God damn it!
It seems like the only saving grace right now is I think there's a trend now ever since Mad Max got released. They took the last Wolverine film from PG-13 to R. That way they could add more fucks and gore. So because they're like, wait a minute, rated R action works? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Deadpool was largely the reason behind Logan getting.
Oh, that's right. I
getting
forgot
the R.
about that.
And because Deadpool, I believe the last time I looked, I think it was I know it's in the top 10 biggest moneymakers of last year. I think it was like number 8 or something. So it was from Fox, and Fox is also doing Logan. And so they were like, all right, well, Deadpool made a crap ton of money. Maybe the R-rated comic book movie thing, we could make it work, because Fox right now is trying to compete with Marvel Disney. And Marvel Disney has a clause that basically their movies have to be PG-13. And so Fox, after the success of Deadpool, is coming at it from the perspective of, okay, well, we're not going to be able to beat them at that game, so to speak, but let's give them something that Marvel Disney can't. Let's give them adult. And it's funny that when you say like adult, but it's like it's not adult. It's just it's R-rated. So they're giving them an R-rated comic book. And the thing is, with something like Deadpool and with Logan, it works as R-rated because the subject material, it is more than PG-13 can handle, because there are some stories in the Marvel Disney movies where I'm like, all right, well, you can't do a PG-13 Punisher. You can't do a proper PG-13 Daredevil. They have to be, because of the material, it's automatically going to get an R because of what's going on in this world. It makes sense for it to be an R. And they were I know Fox initially, I'm sure they're glad that they did now, but initially they were trying really hard to get Deadpool to be PG-13. And Ryan Reynolds basically was like, look, I'm doing this movie, it's going to be R, and he really fought for it to be R, and consequently it made almost $1 billion.
Wow.
So good decisions were made over there.
Good decisions were made, especially because I think it wasn't in our dollars, it was it was like $40-50 million, which is a ridiculous amount to us, but that's a drop in the bucket when you see Monster Trucks was $150 million.
Yeah. That's bad decisions over there.
Yes.
Polar opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Good decisions were made, bad decisions were made.
That's your next YouTube channel. Good decisions, bad decisions.
Good decisions, bad decisions.
Yes, exactly. I could probably do a nice video on that would crack people up.
So what in the realm of horror are you excited coming up in 2017? What do you have your eye on?
Let's see. Well, it's not exactly horror, but I am really, really, really excited about the next Resident Evil. I don't believe in guilty pleasures, because like either you like something or you don't. Like you shouldn't feel guilty about enjoying something.
True.
And I recognize that the Resident Evil movies are a complete departure from the games, but I think that they are fun. Like I really, really enjoy them. They're goofy. They're exciting. They're just enjoyable. They are very fun.
Zombie birds, come on.
Yeah, zombie bird, exactly. Like what a lot of people don't get is that when I talk about movies, a lot of times, like I know the difference between a good movie, an Oscar-winning movie, a movie that's going to get critical acclaim, something like Arrival, and then something like Resident Evil. And you can enjoy both. You don't need to see these thought-provoking, amazing movies all the time. You don't need to see La La Land. And like I'll do a double header of La La Land and then Resident Evil. You don't like it. One doesn't diminish the other. They're both are their own thing. And so I genuinely have no issue with that. So I'm really looking forward to Resident Evil, which is out next week. So I'm going to be there opening night. I am let's see, as far as horror, I'm trying to think of what horror's coming out this year. I'm curious to see Get Out, because that's the Jordan Peele Blumhouse movie. I think that is going to they're playing it off like horror, but I have a feeling it's going to be satire. I mean, just knowing who's making it, I'm not buying that it's going to be a horror film. It's going to be a satire, but they're really pushing it as horror.
Well, and Stepford Wives was basically satire, so it sort of makes sense, right? Conceptually,
right? You know, there's a movie called Raw that I'm looking forward to. Belko Experiment.
Oh yeah,
which was Greg McLean, who did Wolf Creek, which man, I had many an argument with a coworker about that because I saw Wolf Creek and thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I had a buddy of mine who was like, nothing happens the whole movie. I'm like, did you not see the last half hour of the movie?
Don't tell a video editor nothing happens in a movie.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm like, this movie was amazing. Well, it's like the one I used to work with a guy who, he came in one day after Paranormal Activity came out on home video, and came in and said that the whole movie wasn't scary. And I was like, well, what didn't you like? He's like, well, I watched like the first couple minutes and then I fast forwarded and watched the end.
What?
Well, like, well, you didn't watch the movie.
that's not fair.
That's not watching the movie.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how some people are, you know?
I mean, I hate when people do that. The analogy would be, watch the first 2 minutes of the movie, I walk into the room, hit you in the head with a bat, and then wake you up 5 minutes before the movie ends. Like, that's not the right experience for this.
No, it doesn't work out like that.
Nope.
Doesn't work like that. Okay, so where can our listeners find you and follow you?
Well, you can find me on YouTube at Good Bad Flicks. You can also find my website, which is goodbadflix.com, but really the majority of the stuff is just reposts of stuff that's on YouTube. You can also find me on social media, Good Bad Flicks on Facebook and Twitter. I am not on Instagram. There's actually somebody impersonating me on Instagram.
What?
And I'm trying to get the account closed, but Instagram is just they're not believing that I am who I say I am. It's kind of like getting verified on Twitter. It's such a weird but so I keep there are people like, oh, I was following you on Instagram. I'm like, I don't have an Instagram.
No, you weren't.
No, dude, you're freaking famous. That you've arrived. You're being imitated on Instagram. That's amazing. I'm so jealous.
Congratulations.
Yes, I've made it. I have impersonators. And you can also find me on escapistmagazine.com. That is, they have a window where they run my videos a week before YouTube gets them.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. So everyone who's heard that now has no reason not to watch your channel. And if they don't, I'm going to make them watch the Bye Bye Man on repeat. That's their punishment.
A legit threat.
Well,
did you see the Photoshop where somebody made it instead of the Bye Bye Man is the Pee Pee Poo Poo Man?
Yes.
It's like the alternate movie titles of the Bye Bye Man.
Probably better experience watching that.
Yeah, they didn't make the title worse. It just moved laterally.
That's unbelievable. That's how they made that work. Well, thank you so much for taking time out. This was so fun.
Yeah, this is awesome. Everyone go subscribe to his channel, and you do amazing stuff. I really appreciate your time.
This is the only time I'll say follow him everywhere but Instagram, because that is not him. It's fake.
Yes, thank you very much. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.